Good morning and welcome to the Johnston County Board of Education special session, virtually final budget session meeting this morning. Miss Dance, we do have a quorum. We have Miss Andrews, Miss Sessoms, Mr. Bird, Mr. Wooten, and myself have joined this morning. Mr. Carroll and Mr. Johnston are not present, but we do have a quorum. We have 5 here. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bracy and Mr. Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This time we're going to share our final budget with you at this time, Mr. Britt.
Yes, sir. Good morning, board members. Dr. Bracy, thank you for taking time to talk about budgets on a early morning here. I am going to share my screen so you can see what we're looking at. I do have a few action items for your review and approval this morning. The very first one that I have is our insurance renewals for this upcoming year. And so hopefully everybody can see this okay. This is a summary of our different renewal amounts here on the right and what our premiums were on the left, and the carrier in the middle between those. Some were up, some were down. Our automobile insurance was down. We did have a few less vehicles this year that we're insuring. That helped drop our rate. Workers' comp is down a little bit. So our local salaries are up because of the bonuses and planning period stipends that we've been paying. But it has been more than offset by the work of the HR department with lowering our claim amounts. So there's some positive news there. Our property insurance is up because our property values are up. So it is a function of what our values are. Same thing for the wind damage, and also for flood. Flood insurance is also up. One thing that is kind of a challenge for not just us, but all districts that I've been talking to the big 12 districts around the state. And that is cyber liability or cyber insurance. And so we are struggling to keep up with what the insurance companies are requiring school districts to have in place. So that gets kind of above my understanding and ability, of what all that means, as far as like firewalls or the ability to block, cyber threats that come into us. But that is something that school districts are struggling across the state. It is causing our insurance rates to go up, and that's not just for us; it's for everyone that I have spoken to. We're all kind of in the same boat, and our technology team has been working very hard on trying to plug any gaps that we might have in our security and our ability to protect ourselves on that side. But that's why you see a rate increase from that piece. So it is a cost increase from one year to the next. The total is 2.7 million, with a couple that won't renew until August, which we don't have the rates on those. Additionally, we have our renewal for the school board's trust, and so that's not that's not paid to a for-profit company. That is a partnership with other school districts around the state where we all kind of absorb liabilities amongst ourselves. And so our portion of that liability is $185,000 for this upcoming year. And that is my first action item to request the board to approve, is our policies for this upcoming year.
Thank you, Mr. Britt. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to accept these policies as received, and I'll accept the motion at this time.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sessom, second by Mr. Wooten. Due to us being on virtual, we'll go to a roll call, starting with Mr. Bird.
Yes.
Ms. Andrews.
Yes.
Mr. Wooten.
Yes.
Ms. Sessoms.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. The second item I have for your approval this morning is our final budget amendment of the year. There are some pretty decent changes here at year end, which is why I needed to ask for the last minute budget approval. So on the state side, there wasn't too many changes. The state does their final allotments, usually in late May, and we usually get that to the board in June. So these are all kind of normal amounts. This 009 is that is what we call a guaranteed allotment. So to give you a kind of an analogy, that's kind of like the state coming in and giving us a blank check. So the state pays for our retirement. So your annual leave payouts, et cetera, come out of that pot of money. And so that had to be increased this year because of the number of retirements. So that's a pretty large dollar amount for us this year. So, moving on down, we got our final transportation allotment for the year, but unfortunately, as you'll see when we look at our local allotment, even that was not enough to absorb the cost of fuel. If anybody's been to the gas pump in the last few months, you've seen how much we're paying, how much more we're paying for fuel now, and our buses are not exempt from that. We are subject to market conditions and market swings, and it really impacted this program. They were able to manage to stay within budget in total, which was very surprising considering the cost increase they absorbed. But they did a really good job of it, and I certainly appreciate that. We did have some textbook purchases here this year, and that's reflected here at the bottom. So how that works is PRC 130 here is like it's kind of like a warehouse or where the money initially goes. And so if you want to buy it, you can have choices. You can either buy it straight from the state, or you can buy it from the marketplace. And so usually most districts buy from the marketplace. And so when you buy it from the marketplace, the state requires us to transfer the funds from PRC 130 to 131, and that's what you see here. That's why those dollar amounts are exactly matched. It's just a transfer from one pot of money to another, and that amount is fully spent. A new allotment that we received is our Smart Bus Safety Pilot. I don't know a whole lot about that program. That's a through the Transportation Initiative. But if you have any questions about that, I can get Mr. Marlin to reach out and answer anything you might have on that program. Looking at local, quite a few changes on the local side. And here you see again, this is our local portion of our yellow bus cost, and so transportation was able to live within their budget. We did have to pull it out of our 706, so we had to cut some expenses in so transportation costs not eligible for state reimbursement. What that means is that's just activity bus costs, our fleet repairs. So basically anything that's not a yellow bus drops into 706, but they were able to work within their budget. And so several other changes. I won't get into each of them. There's just some movements between the budget. Unless you have any particular questions in there. We did, like I said, we did purchase textbooks this year, and you see part of that is in local because you don't receive enough state funds to fully purchase textbooks for any school district. But we're not immune to that either. So there is an increase to be able to buy textbooks this year. So move on to federal. Very few changes in federal. We did get an additional PRC 60 allotment this year, which is for EC, and that was pretty much the primary federal change. Capital outlay, just we had 2 more yellow buses delivered, and so that's reflected here in our budget. So that will be our last 2 deliveries this year from the state. No change in school nutrition. Fund 8 is our grants, and the largest one that we have here is our ECF grant. And so $6.2 million value grant, and that is funded from the American Rescue Plan, or also known as ESSER. That is a project that we don't actually see the money for. So that's one thing that a lot of folks don't realize when they talk about, well, how much money the school districts have. A lot of times the school district doesn't actually have any of the cash. Like, we don't actually hold the cash. The federal government will hold the cash. And this is a prime example of that. So this ECF grant, we are receiving laptops and devices that is being funded by the federal government. And so what this line item is, we're not actually cutting checks for the total value of those. We are cutting some checks for, I think, a cost difference of what the Fed was willing to pay and versus what the total cost of it was, but it's a very small amount relative to what you see here. You can kind of think of that as a matching portion, but we don't actually, of that $6.2 million, that will not flow into our bank account, and we will not write checks for it. That's just an entry on our financial statements so that we can record the value, the dollar value of receiving student devices. So that what we were notified as that value is $6.2 million, and that's why you see it here in Fund 8 for a grant. So we had finished up our indirect cost. That's what you see down here at the bottom. There was another large increase, several additional revenue amounts, as you see there. Happy to dive into any of them that you may want to ask questions about. And then Fund 7, we just budget revenue as it comes in. That's our before and after school care, and that's our final dollar amount of how we ended the year. And that is all I have for the presentation for our budget amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Britt. Thank you for going through those line items. And at this time, this is an action item, so I entertain a motion to approve the budget amendment 5.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Byrd, second by Mr. Wooten. All in favor. We'll start with a roll call with Ms. Sessoms.
Yes.
Ms. Andrews.
Yes.
Mr. Wooten.
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wooten. The next item I have is a continuing resolution. So we did get a look at what the state budget will hopefully be last night. That has not passed the General Assembly yet and has not been signed by the governor. So we don't have a final budget. And so for us to be able to operate in the new fiscal year, we do request that the board allow us to continue operations. That's what this continuing resolution means. It basically says that it allows the school district to spend up to the dollar amounts that were previously approved for this current year. So there can't be any new expenses that haven't already been approved by the board, with the exception that this will allow us to pay any salary increases authorized by the board or by the General Assembly. And this is for an action item for your approval as well.
Thank you, Mr. Britt. This is an action item for the resolution to continue to move forward with everything that we've already approved as far as expenses to be paid. At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Ms. Sessoms, second by Ms. Andrews. Any questions or comments on this?
This carries us until the final budget is approved. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So if we get a kind of looking at the timeline, if the governor signs a budget here over the next couple of weeks, then DPI then will go in and calculate our portion of that pie, of that budget, and then hopefully we'll have something to us in August. And
Okay.
so if it's in time for the August board meeting, we'll get it to the August board meeting. If not, it'll probably be September.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, we'll go to a roll call vote starting with Ms. Sessoms.
Yes.
Mr. Wooten.
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes.
Ms. Andrews.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. The last thing I have for you this morning for your consideration and approval is a request to transfer fund balance from our current expense fund to our capital outlay fund. And so we find ourselves in a good position financially within our current expense fund, but due to all the vacancies that we've had. This is vacancy savings. And I think we've talked about that quite a bit between us and the Board of Commissioners. So what the request is to be able to transfer $8 million of that fund balance and transfer it into capital outlay so that Mr. Moore can work on capital projects throughout the school district here for this upcoming year. And so this will need to be approved by the Board of Education. And if it's approved this morning, then Dr. Brace and I will take it to the county commissioners to be approved at their next board meeting as well.
Thank you, Mr. Britt. This is an action item as well. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Got a
Second.
motion by Mr. Wooten, second by Ms. Andrews. I will, at this time, before we go, I just have one quick comment on this. I just want to thank Dr. Bracy and Mr. Britt and your teams for being frugal with our money. You guys have done an outstanding job of making sure that we get exactly what we need, but also at the prices that are relevant. We're not overpaying for anything, but more importantly, you're watching every penny that the Johnston County Board of Education or the school system have. So I just want to thank you all for everything that you do in regards to our finances.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
At this time, I'll go to a roll call. Excuse me. We'll go to a roll call, starting with Ms. Andrews.
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes.
Ms. Sessoms.
Yes.
Mr. Wooten.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Britt. The last thing, I just got one quick comment, and then we can adjourn. But all of this information that we've talked about today is about our budget. But more importantly, now we need to focus on our bond. And the bond is very, very important to our students, our staff, our stakeholders in Johnston County because of the continuing growth we're seeing in this county. And as you've seen this morning in our budget, none of this is earmarked to build schools. None of this is earmarked to, have additions to certain schools within our county. So I say all that to say that, number one, I hope everybody who's watching this is understanding that we need schools more than ever with the growth that's going on in this county. And then what Smithfield announced a couple of weeks ago about 2,000 homes and additional 850 students in the Johnston County Public Schools that will be coming in a couple of years. But more importantly, the candidates that are running for the Johnston County Board of Education, I seriously hope that they're standing behind this bond just as our Board of Education is, as well as our school system, and they see the need as well. I'd be very concerned if any candidate that's currently running for November's election is not behind this bond. We have major problems because we can't continue to house new students if we don't have a bond passed to build additional schools. So I know all of us know that on this meeting, but I just felt it was necessary to make sure that I made that comment because I stand firmly behind, we need to pass this bond. We need these additional schools. We need additional classrooms in certain other schools in our county. So thank you all. Thank the facilities department as well. They're not on here, but all the hard work they're doing behind the scenes in regards to the bond. And I look forward to the meeting where we discuss that further as far as what those additions and additional schools will look like.
Right. And I would just add that, we received approval from the county commissioners in our meeting with LGC and with the county commissioners vote to have a bond of $177 million. We understand that we're going to build at least 2 schools in addition to another school with that money. But the other money, the expenditures of that money have not been determined and voted on by the board. And so that's another meeting that we will have, I believe, next week as the bond committee. But anyways, the final vote by the board has not taken place as to how that money will be spent. But we do know it's going to be a couple of new schools and in addition to a school and other things.
And Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on what both you and Ms. Andrews have said, this is also a school safety issue. When we have children that are in mobile units, and when I talk about children, I'm talking about pre-K through seniors in high school. Those are not, we cannot secure those mobile units, those mobile classrooms like we can secure a building. And, with all of the violence that has occurred in our schools across the nation, it is imperative that this bond pass so that we can provide safe classrooms for students to learn in and teachers to teach in and our staff to work in. So, I just think that we need to keep that in the front of our minds.
I totally agree, Ms. Sessoms. Very well said. And so that's another reason this bond is so critical. But I just wanted to relay that, and I appreciate you updating too, Ms. Andrews, that some people across the county already have the perception that we have the projects in place, and that is not accurate information either. So,
Mr. Chairman, it's also important that, and I just wanted to get this in, that our communities are active and reach out to us and become active when we have our meetings with feeder patterns, because the bond is for all school feeder patterns, and we need to be touching each community. And the only way we can do that is get feedback from those feeder patterns as well, from parents, and teachers, and administrators. So it's important that we reach the whole county, and that's the importance of everybody. We need to all be in on this to benefit our students. And I'd also like to say, not just getting away from the bond, Dr. Bracy and Mr. Britt have come up with some great plans, not only to fill our new schools and existing schools with teachers and TAs and bus drivers. There's some great things coming down the line to encourage all our teaching slots to get filled. So I appreciate what they're doing behind the scenes, and it will be rolled out to the public.
absolutely.
Yeah, so Mr. Wood will roll those incentives and retention incentives, recruitment incentives, and we'll roll those out to you as well. And I think the timeline and the mechanics, Mr. Chair, of the entire operation is the bond committee will meet next week and finalize the list of projects. The bond committee will then make a recommendation to the full board so we can get that special session call where we can approve personnel, approve these recruiting and retention incentives, and approve those final bond projects as well. We like to wrap that up the week after the 4th.
Let me say one more thing, because, and I know we need to adjourn, but I just want to commend our teachers and our administration, our staff. We don't have a final number on our test scores, but we know that they are much, much better. And this is due to the hard work of the teachers and students and staff members in our schools. And I just commend all of them. It's not been an easy year, but they have stepped up and done exactly what their staff and Dr. Bracy have asked them to do. And I just, I could not be prouder of everybody in our schools and how hard they have worked, and probably what was the most difficult year in the history of public education. So congratulations to all of them. And we look forward to getting the final confirmation of our test scores. And we know that's a little bit away, but hard work pays off, and it's their hard work. It's not ours, it's theirs.
Absolutely. Very, very well said, Ms. Andrews. At this time, if there's no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Wooten,
Second.
second by Ms. Sessoms. We'll go to a roll call starting with Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Mr. Wooten,
Yes.
Ms. Sessoms.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion carries 5-0. We're now adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You.